Guru Nation, I'm here to talk to you about Plato's The Republic and why coordinators are never going to be replaced by machines. So, here's a big question. If a machine could do everything a CRC can do, because we are now in an era where AI is just entrenching itself and it's only getting better. It's just entrenching itself in every little aspect. Patient Ace, my company, that helps sites with patient recruitment. So hit me up if you're interested in using it. We just released voice, like an AI responding to patient inbound leads, and it's actually very smooth and only getting better. I'm here to show you why CRCs are still irreplaceable and why it's tied to philosophy. And bear with me, I used to hate philosophy. I just got into it a few years ago because it helps us with these mental models and helps us answer the bigger questions. So, this ancient philosopher Plato, who basically is like the father of modern Western philosophy, he said the world we see is like shadows on a cave wall. So we're going to get into these things. But the world we see is like shadows on a cave wall. Just imagine we're sitting in a cave our whole lives. There's a fire behind us. And when people pass in front of the fire, we can't see the people. We just see their shadows. And I see this kind of like our industry and CRCs and just the entire industry in general, kind of looking at forms of like ideals. They're not the ideals because the real ideals are behind us. We can't see them. They're just bringing us closer and closer to the ideal, which is never attainable, but it's the pursuit of getting this ideal. So that's why I think CRC roles are safe because for CRC, the form of their role, like the ideal, is ethical, patient focused, and meaning. And I'm going to get into a couple of examples where I don't think a machine is ever replacing a coordinator, at least in the foreseeable future, right? I'm not talking about things like in silico trials later on. I'm talking about right now. So, what will we lose though, right? I mean, CRC jobs are safe. But the allegory of the cave discusses forms as eternal ideas versus physical shadows. And if you think of the forms or the ideals as the blueprint to what a coordinator does, job security aligns with this. And it's actually inaccessible for the foreseeable future, in my opinion. AI can help get closer to this ideal, but it's never going to be the ideal itself. I think a human still has a better chance of reaching that ideal than AI as far as being a coordinator is concerned. That is not the case for every job in our industry, but I think for a coordinator, it's probably the most obvious of why this ideal is the least accessible for AIs. But I'm excited about the tools that AI is going to bring forward. Like if you look at things like Patient Ace, or if you look at things like some of the companies I'm involved with, Select IQ, um, Gleam, there's interesting things coming up that I think are going to help coordinators realize these ideals more. So if you think about it, Plato taught that the true reality lies in the perfect forms, not the messy world we see. So the shadows you see on the caves, that's like our messy world. That's like your messy job. But the true reality lies just behind us. We can't see it, right? It's the things passing in front of the fires. These are the ideals. And the ideal of a coordinator, if you distill it to what a coordinator actually does, it's helping advance medical progress. And CRCs are like the mediators that bridge that ideal with the real world. So they don't just follow a blueprint, they refine the blueprint. For example, if a patient comes in and is unsure about doing a study, right? the the current technology we have, the AI is not going to be able to talk the patient into being more assured. You need a human for that. The human can also improvise. The human can say, you know what? We don't actually have a study for you right now. It's fair that this study may not be your best fit. I'm going to have you talk to our PI, but we do have some studies coming up. So I'd like to get your number and let you know when a more appropriate study comes up for you. Now, in theory, an AI can do this, but it's just for an AI, it's just another task. Whereas for a coordinator, there's something about a human engagement that allows you to have empathy and lets the patient in this case know that you know what, this is the more fair and honest advice that I'm getting. And CRCs ultimately are storytellers. And a study isn't just about getting the data, but it's about helping a patient understand if a trial is appropriate for them or not, and then tailor whatever the opportunities are at the site to the patient's hopes or fears, making them feel like a partner, not a number. So that human connection, I don't think AI can copy it anytime soon. I think the CRCs will always be needed. Now, there's a thing called ethical discernment. Let me share a story about a coordinator. This happened to me actually just recently. They were explaining a trial to a patient. And luckily for us, we had several trials, and the patient seemed nervous. And they uncovered that the patient was actually afraid of injections in this case. And the CRC guided them. I mean, they were terribly afraid of injections, and these were like self-administered injections that the patient was supposed to take home and do. There was no way the patient was going to do this. We had another study, same indication, slightly different mechanism of action. It had a pill, and they were able to suggest that study to the patient. Now, yes, an AI could have, again, in theory, have done this. But the AI is thinking about a task first. Whereas a coordinator, I think in our truest form, and this is where philosophy gets in, and if you are a coordinator, you need to start thinking less like a machine and let the machines do that stuff and start thinking more in terms of ideals. Like at the end of the day, what is your true essence as a coordinator? And I think your true essence is not to get tasks done. That's that's for the robots. I think our true essence as coordinators and me, ancillary to that as a site owner, site director, is to actually help patients. And here's where the true ideals, true forms, and the true virtues come out. If you truly cannot help or don't think you have a realistic chance of helping a patient, the human thing is to tell them not to do a study right now. But if you tell a patient, I honestly don't think this study is appropriate for you, we do have another one starting up in 3 months, but it's the right thing to do. Now, a compromise that I think an AI also wouldn't be able to do would be, hey, since you've never done a study, I don't think this study is the most appropriate for you, but, and let's see what the PI says, but I think it's worth a try. And if you don't like it, in a few months you can drop out and do our other one, right? Now, make sure that's correct with the protocols and all that. That's for you and the PI and your clinical team to discuss. But that's another move, that's another human move that an AI won't do. And that there's something about that ideal that's like you're putting the patient first rather than the study first. And you're putting the patient first rather than the site first, which these AIs are catered. I mean, who's paying for these AIs? It's sponsors, it's the sites, it's the CROs. So obviously their incentives are structured in a way to help those stakeholders. I think your ideal, your truest form as a coordinator is to help the patient, and this is where ethical discernment comes in. And if you really uncover the patient's fears or you figure out what's best for the patient, you have a conversation with the patient, you can go off script, you can bring in the PI when needed, right? Plato would call the coordinators, and maybe even the PIs, but really it's the coordinators, the philosopher kings of the clinic, wise leaders who protect people with their judgment. Let's break that down. Let's repeat that again. Wise leaders who protect their patients with their judgment. AI might crunch numbers fast, but it can't sense fear or decide what's truly just. And not fear in the sense that it's so extreme to where a patient is not going to do a study or not. An example I just gave. Fear in the sense of the coordinator, like, you know what? I actually don't think this patient's going to make the entire trial. Like, this is a 3-year study. Maybe we can put them in a shorter study, or maybe that shorter study didn't start yet. Maybe we can put them in this shorter study, and then when that other study starts and the patients, if my hypothesis was correct about where I think that patient is at in the course of that study, maybe we can withdraw them and switch them when appropriate to the new study. These are again philosopher king type of statements. You're actually doing what's best for the patient in that sense, but you're also doing what's best for the sponsor and the site. You're doing what's best for the sponsor in the sense of this patient doesn't belong, and you're doing what's best for the site in the sense of, well, this patient may or may not belong. Let's put them for a little bit and then see how they go. And those are like making compromises, but really only humans are the best ones at doing that. And that's where the philosopher king comes into play. And if you're a coordinator, listen, you're a king, you're a queen, you're protecting your patients, you're protecting your site, and you're protecting your sponsors. Now, there's this whole thing about empathy. And to contrast human insight with the AI number crunching, this human insight and this ability to mitigate stress and ability to mitigate negative emotions from all stakeholders, but primarily with the patients. Because again, if we think about the true essence of a coordinator and the true essence of like the form of an ideal coordinator, it's what? I mean, if we're truly governed by good clinical practice, it's good clinical practice first. What does that mean? That means patient safety first, above protocol adherence. So valuing the patient's needs first, even above the sponsors who pay you, and even above the site who literally pays you. That's the ideal, in my opinion. And this is again, these are my opinions. All right, I forgot to preface this with that. These are my opinions, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think in the comments. I am going to turn this into a longer article for link, but I think if we use that guiding principle, GCP, that helps us with our form of the ideal, because the ideal of a coordinator is not to enter data as quickly as possible, or resolve queries within 5 business days, or make sure the PIs sign everything they need. Like, yes, that is a very important part of what a coordinator does, but it's not the ideal. Like, you can't have everything be included in the ideal. Because if you have this ideal version of, Plato uses the example, I think he uses the example of a chair. Like, what makes an ideal chair? And it's basically a subjective thing, and it can't even be a collective thing because the ideal chair, that means there's parts of chairs that are ideal and there's other parts that are not. But there must be an ideal, and maybe this is where everyone has their own ideal version. of what that chair is. And I think it's the same thing with a coordinator. There is an ideal somewhere, and maybe it's your ideal, or maybe it's your site's ideal, and that's for leadership to at the site to figure out. We certainly do at Yuma Clinical Trials. But I think if the industry starts thinking about what is the ideal form of a coordinator, it's putting patients first. I think we can agree on that. And it's not entering data quickly, and it's not resolving queries quickly, and it's not filing things in the regulatory binder quickly. Like, yes, those are all important. You have to do those, but that's not the ideal of a coordinator. And I think this is where we are in this point in time in the industry. We are getting very close to where the not ideal things like entering data quickly, like resolving queries quickly, like filing documents quickly, like alerting someone when a document's expiring quickly. Those are all automated AI robotic tasks. I think we are in the crossroads right now in our industry where those tasks can be done by AI so that the coordinators can focus more on becoming their ideal self, the ideal version of themselves. Now, those tools have to work well. And this entire 2 decades I've been in this industry, we've slowly merged into these tools starting to work better and better and better. For example, I came in when EDC was a new innovation. Like we used to, our case report forms were paper. Like we would take the source data on paper as well, and we would copy it, transcribe it on carbon copy, which is a white paper, a yellow paper, and a pink paper. That was our data entry process. EDC was a huge innovation because it kind of simplified that process. Now it's simplified it slightly less for a coordinator, like it became less cumbersome to enter data, but it was still a redundant task. But it did simplify a lot for the CRAs because they didn't have to come and rip the papers, right? But it still didn't allow us to be our ideal version of ourselves as a coordinator, which is putting patients first above all else. So this is starting to come because now we're getting tools that are going to start doing data entry automatically. Now we're getting tools that are going to remind patients of their appointments automatically. Now we're getting tools that are going to file your reg documents automatically, that are going to route documents for signature automatically. So the coordinator, it's not going to be entirely passive still because the coordinator has to make sure that these things are flowing smoothly because right now all these tools, they're not really communicating with each other. They all exist in silos. So this coordinator is going to be kind of running all these platforms to make sure, kind of like a conductor of an orchestra, right? They're like the glue that holds everything together. But little by little, that's going to be more passive. And it's getting us to the point where we can work on our ideals, which are again putting patients first. So, Plato has this concept of the good. It's this general concept of the good, which he doesn't really explain what it is, but that's the ultimate ideal. And whether you may or may not agree with it, it doesn't matter. It's a good way of prioritizing things in a hierarchy when we can think abstractly. I think health, human health, has to be one of the ultimate ideals, right? The highest state we can aim for just after existing. It might even be more important than existing because if you don't have health, in some cases you have suffering. CRCs advance this ideal by putting patients first, right? Now, where underneath that ideal of advancing health is entering data quickly on the spectrum? I mean, it's pretty damn low. Or where is that ideal as far as filing something in a reg binder? Pretty damn low. But where is that ideal in terms of, listen, I don't think this study's right for you. We're going to talk to the PI to double check, I'm gonna talk to the PI. I actually think there's a better study for you. I'm not sure why you haven't considered that one. I know you came in for this one because you saw the ad, but I actually think this other one's more appropriate for you. Do you want to discuss that? That's human involvement that I don't think AI can replace. Now, this is like a caring partnership. This is the form of the good Plato was referring to. This is if you put health up there like I did, if it's the highest ideal enabling human flourishing, this is the highest state after being alive. And CRCs advance this form by prioritizing patient welfare, and I think reinforces their irreplaceable role. So, if you consider yourself a guardian of trust and health, we are in an era where all this stuff's happening, and simultaneously, science is like the least trusted, one of the least trusted industry. Big pharma is probably number one on the list of most hated industry. It's not going to be more machines that enhance this trust for patients. It's not going to be more algorithms that reduce this stigma. It's going to be a coordinator's empathy that turns a study from a cold experiment into a caring partnership. And imagine sitting there listening to a patient, listening to all their concerns, spending 45 minutes with that patient, and then telling them, we could enroll you in this study. If you want to, you can always withdraw. But I think it's in your best interest and against my company's best interest temporarily for you to wait 2 months and do this next study. Or if you want, you can do this study, and when that study comes around, we can reassess. How's that? That builds trust, all right? Not just in the study, but in the science itself. And we could let all the other stuff, entering data, making sure we have enough lab kits, making sure the IP is temperature excursion, there's no excursions, making sure we file deviations and we renew IRB uh, approvals and we use the latest informed consent. Those are all automated. All right, but the CRC as a mediator, a narrative weaver, a guardian of trust, and ultimately health. These are things that I don't think AI can ever replace. And this is why, in my opinion, if health is the ideal, if GCP is the North Star, if Plato taught us anything, it's that if even though it's maybe not practical to strive to be the ideal coordinator, maybe it's never going to be attainable because we are human and we are imperfect. But having this ideal form and building our industry to achieve that form and building our tools to achieve that form, that might be well worth it. And this is why I think coordinator and not every job in this space. Maybe I'll do some videos of the jobs I think are most endangered from this stuff. If you've watched it till the end, you know the spoilers. If your job relies on human involvement and solving complexities and using reason and rationality, but also using emotions and managing emotions. If that's part of your role, then you're safe. If it's not, then you're not. I would start with The Republic by Plato. Let me know what you think. This is just my opinion. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.